Stream of a stream. Huge.
Update OBS. Actually, I did update OBS. I'm so glad that the like the browser stuff doesn't break on OBS updates. Like the chat and stuff. It's very nice. Knock on wood.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What time is it? I'll still give people some time. Hello everybody. For those in here that kind of just arrived, you're still very early. Hello. If people have questions for what we've gone over the last 7-8 weeks, specifically with DOM and footprint stuff, this today is going to be a very good opportunity to ask them. I want to kind of do like a recap. We've done so much information in the past 2 months. I want to kind of test the water, see where people are. I will not be presenting very much new market information today in terms on that front, and take a little break. But with that being said, if there are questions, we can definitely get into them, and I can fill some time.
Mm-mm.
I'll give it a couple more minutes. What's up, Aram? All right. Well, hello everybody. It is about that time, so we will get going. Now, for today, I want to take a little bit of a segue away from what we've been doing over the last couple months. We've done a lot of DOM work, subsequently a lot of footprint work. So after we kind of do market overview, I would love to hear opinions of people of how the class have been, if people have been doing tick drills at all, if they have started to recognize patterns, if they feel more comfortable on the DOM, etc., etc. And if there are any comments or questions, depending on how long that discussion takes, we can kind of dive into some stuff if there is pressing things. If not, I want to take a little bit of a break away from our DOM and footprint modules, and do a little bit of kind of market adjacent stuff. So something that we don't talk about too much are kind of like the implications of a lot of the things we hear on the news, and how we can utilize those things to set up our kind of trading biases and ideas, right? Obviously, we teach you guys and promote more of intraday trading, very structural based, but there's still times where you might have a long-term portfolio, and you probably should, and doing some navigations within that as more of, a long-term and kind of retirement mindset, right? And taking some profits from our intraday and putting them into there, or just having a better understanding of the kind of current market atmosphere, as well as the outside forces acting upon them. So with that being said, obviously I am not a geopoliticist. I am not an economist. I am not super knowledgeable on those things, so I want to go in and kind of watch some videos on the good old YouTube and learn some of these things together, just so we can kind of have a better understanding, because it is important for navigating these things, especially understanding if and when, and I'll probably lean more towards when this type of stuff happens again in the future. People who were around in trading during the Russian invasion know that we had very similar moves on, say, oil, but those things are much more reflected in natural gas, and it's like, why is that, etc., etc. Well, if we have a little bit of understanding of kind of like the inner workings of international trade, these hotspots, we can really position ourselves better, both intraday and long term, to capture some good moves and to make some decisions about how severe some actions are. So I'll get the recording going now. I'll do a market overview, and like I said, please post questions if you have any for what we've done over the last couple months. But if not, we will get into the other material. So we can start as normal with our market overview. So big thing with last week, obviously we had a holiday. On Thursday, Asia, Europe still traded, but New York session was closed. Last week felt quite bearish in nature, right? Especially during our New York trading, where on Monday we put in our high for the week, and then subsequently throughout the week, lower highs, lower lows just channeled back down towards our January POC, which was our past kind of primary pivot area. And then Thursday into Friday, we did see more of a balanced auction. And this Thursday, Friday is going to be very important to watch for the rest of the week. Very reactive today. But with last week feeling bearish throughout the week, it was actually quite bullish with a weekly higher high and a weekly higher low put in. We saw value move up. We did close last week below kind of our last 2-week value, but with Friday we show attempt and desire to return to it. Today, even with some of our early morning volatility, obviously the gap down last night, we came back up and we're putting a weekly POC right where last week's POC was as well. Getting into some levels. So the primary pivot for me for this week and from the newsletter is basically this LVN, right? 60-30 up through this kind of 60-50 area, and we saw it was decently respected today, where when we reject it, we find sellers in this area. We do return to our 6,000 area with access down towards this January POC being a possibility. And then looks above where we can't find buyers in this zone, we trade back through, right? Obviously, at the end of the day, we do find buyers to step up and in, and we get our secondary level. Now, this will still be my primary look throughout the week, especially now as we've traded above. We want to really see buyer support above this, preferably above this 60-50 edge, 60-50 to 60-60. If we go and kind of chunk out this area, we can do it like this. I'll change the color so we can see it. But same idea, right? End of last week, we saw Monday, Tuesday be supportive in this area. When we flip down and we see the offer come in, boom, that's when sellers take control. So same idea as last week. Can buyers hold this? If yes, we want to see them push into last week's high. If no, we would assume a balanced rotation back down through our pivot and towards our 6K primary buying edge. If this ends up being our weekly high, a lot of looks then are going to be down back into our previous pivot at 59.50. Can we take out the lows from Globex and last week during our regular trading hours and come back down into this pivot? The secondary move beneath is going to need a catalyst, in my opinion. We've spent a decent amount of time. You can see it back through early June here, and it was previously end of May when we had our first test up and in. But building out this as our primary kind of auction for the early summer and value. So if we look away from this, I think it's going to take a decent catalyst. Obviously, sellers kind of have catalysts on their side here, depending on what happens in the Middle East and U.S. involvement there. But it's going to take a pretty big shakeup. We still do have tariff information around the corner. Things got delayed. We're on delay, 2 or 3 now? But White House headlines, Middle Eastern headlines, right? The catalysts are definitely leaning more towards potential acceleration for bears if they come out poor. But I really think we're going to need it if we're going to look down and out. We'll quickly return to buyers. We talked about these highs. This node structure up above is our all-time high. Primary selling structure, our all-time high sits right above at 166. I would be surprised if we get in here and hold this at all. So if for some reason we do see a strong squeeze and we complete our move over last week's high and into the structure, I'm really going to be looking for a return back towards our 60-60 and 60-50 and to build this out. I do not feel like we spent enough time bringing buy-side value up enough to really support a move up here, and I would be very surprised if we instantly hold this ledge and put in an all-time high with what's going on currently. It could be wrong. Generally am with this kind of stuff, but be aware that we are knocking on our doors of big sellers and where we saw primary value switches previously. So that's kind of it. The big areas to watch from last week are the Thursday, Friday auction. Right? If we can build above and hold above these Thursday, Friday, or below, right, that's where we're going to get our acceleration. If not, your balanced auction is basically this 60-50 if we come back down and through, and we trade down towards 6K, where we can have access into January POCs towards 88, slightly under. We do have some structure here, and then back up and through. Basically, this 60 to 70 point range. That's what I would expect. Now, I do want to go over here and talk about Russell really quickly. We've been looking at this as well for the last couple of months as it's been hitting its head. On this basically 2120 area, we have this really strong LVN. This is still substantially lagging structurally to ES and NQ. Obviously, ES is back up through the January auction, holding above January's POC and coming into our all-time high. Well, on RTY, this is that auction, right? This upper structure here. So we're still seeing a structural and value lag on RTY. Now, why am I a little bit more excited about this week than previously? Well, very strong mother bar where we did breach through our LVN, right, and test in. Obviously, instantly sold off when we closed 2 weeks ago, quite bearish. But last week, we have a really strong inside bar here, right on our primary edge of our current and lower value, and there's a lot of potential here now, especially at this mother bar high and this kind of bullish start to the week. So I'm going to very much be watching these mother bar edges. You guys should know by now that I really enjoy inside bars on RTY. They almost always lead to a move away in a certain direction, so lots of eyes on here. Russell needs to get up and through. If not, we should expect rotations back down and kind of take out these multi-month lows and come back down into our lower edge here. 2020 is a good spot to look. But still, a lot of potential here. It's just kind of a waiting game on Russell. But this inside bar with the really strong mother bar into pivots on both sides is very appealing to me. So yeah, this kind of statement there. We can see, I mean, we've gone through this quite a bit, but even here, same thing. Strong mother bar that has a value shift. Fail, we put an inside, reject the highs, right? Boom, trade through the LVN. Next week, inside, same thing, right? Lots of weekly inside bars on RTY lead to very good movement, and we got a good one here as well. So keep that on your radar, especially this wick high. Any questions on market structure? Things shouldn't be too new, shouldn't be too fresh. We're just kind of waiting for movement away from here, right? Anyone have anything that they want to add? All right. If not, then we can kind of go into the excited to be here. Hell yeah, Ty. So we've had like 7 or 8 now official footprint in DOM modules. As a review, the big thing that we've been focusing on, right, is establishing normalcy of a market, whether that's normal order flow, normal size, right? And then finding outliers around them. Very easy to find them on the footprint. Very easy to see them on the DOM. I think these last couple of weeks have been very good exercises because during like the beginning of June, and even a little bit before end of May, we had a pretty thick ES and a decently thick NQ. But ES was kind of back to its normalcy, where we were seeing 80 to kind of 120 resting contracts on the DOM at all time. Now, last week and this week so far, big shifts, right? Very big shifts, where even today, your average kind of ES contract size resting was 15 to 20. If even that, we had very, very low even outliers down into, our 100, 200 contracts was kind of our edge outliers that we were observing. There was a couple times we saw 500 flashed and taken, but very good example of market conditions changing and you needing to change your ability to read what is the normal market and what do our outliers look. So as we've kind of gone through these modules, I think the last 4 or 5 weeks into the last, cut 2 weeks have been a very good practice in that. Have people been able to notice that? Have people felt more comfortable with the DOM as well? Kind of just like a beginning statement. Are people feeling better? I know when we started this, people were really not feeling great about their ability to read the DOM, or how to make improvements, and doing that might be a more or a better way to kind of say it. Do people feel like they've improved? Do people feel like they're getting some good takeaways from these things? And it can be for footprint as well. Right, the signals and kind of skill set stays the same. Apply it in the future when you get the setups more locked in. Well, that is a positive thing. Anyone else have any questions? Have they felt more comfortable? I feel like usually when we do kind of, any module, but sometimes these bigger modules, we have a lot of aha moments. And I haven't felt them so much with our DOM modules coming from people. So, if there are questions, or if we say stuff during the day, specifically during the day, please ask questions. No, I understand that, Ty, but it's also, that means I have to present the material differently, right? So, I need to know if people need that. If questions, comments do come up, please, like I said, please bring them up. We talk about this stuff all day during the day. The things we say all stem from this, and essentially from the basics that we've presented to you guys. So please, if there are still misunderstandings or you feel like you're not catching the signals, ask and bring it up so we can walk through them and see things in real time. And hopefully as well, we talked about this quite extensively, but if you're feeling still uncertain, doing tick drills, right? Going and reviewing big moves you missed is almost more important, or is more important than reviewing the moves you caught, to try to start seeing these signals and these pressures. But really, if you can really start pounding tick drills, doesn't have to be a long time, just a little bit per day, your speed of reading will improve dramatically. I can guarantee it. So that is my advice. If there's nothing from anyone, then we can kind of go take our little segue away here. And we're going to start focusing at the beginning on the Strait of Hormuz, because I believe that is going to be the biggest thing that comes out of this current conflict. I know on Sunday they did order a shutdown, Iran did. But how well that's enforced, what that actually means, time will tell. But that is going to be our biggest impact on United States oil, as well as global price of oil, availability of oil, especially with stuff still going down with Russian sanctions, right? All of a sudden, all of our oil is going to be sanctioned. And that will have dramatic consequences on both U.S. energy prices as well as equity prices. Because to make things, we need energy, right? We need to power machines, both here and abroad. Everybody needs to do it. So some of these areas are quite important to our kind of global trade. And then after that, there is also a really good video that ties more, well, into kind of this idea of trade and manufacturing, but more so on the tariff side, to kind of give us some more insight on those things. So we'll kind of get into these videos. Like I said, I am not an expert. I'm not even a novice in these areas. So we can learn together, we can ask questions together, and try to find answers together. But understanding this stuff, like I said at the beginning, is quite important and can really help you navigate things. I guess the last precursor that I'll say is even last week, when this Middle Eastern stuff kicked off, there was a lot of questions on like, okay, what is this like transition to looking at oil compared to say like an RTY or like a volatility product, right? Like VIX or UVXY as our kind of counter signal or early kind of divergence signal. And if you have an understanding of the implications and how markets trade together, right, how oil and tech are generally inverses and are quite strong inverses in these times when either side is threatened, right, and we're in a interesting situation right now where we have trade regulations that are threatening the tech growth side, as well as conflict issues that are threatening oil production and trade side, and they're kind of butting heads. So understanding these things and catching them early can help keep your signals for intraday trading clean, as well as help manage and make decisions both directionally with a bias, as well as longer term, and make some portfolio transactions. If people remember the initial Russian invasion, within the Discord, we made a lot of money and a lot of great trades trading oil, but specifically trading natural gas. And having these understandings allows you to make that mentality shift in these times of what products to be in, and even more importantly, when to get out and when to stop with them, right? Because they're very volatile products. So I think it's important. We'll take a little break, like I said, away from our order flow. We will come back. There's still a couple more modules I want to do kind of through July. And then at the end of July, we will probably complete our major order flow module and go into something new. So that is the plan. I will get these up on the stream. Let me change my screen really quick. All right, we ready to go? Side note, I thought it was comical when I prepared this over the weekend. I noticed this morning Sig also shared a video from this channel, Real Life Lore. Really great channel for kind of neutrality on some of these historical events that take place and dictating have information upon them. So people have more questions about these things, they want more information, this guy's got a ton of videos on Middle Eastern, the economy, politics, how things change. So great channel. All right, we'll get into this one.
This video is made possible by CuriosityStream and Nebula. Watch another, full-length companion video to this one in my Modern Conflict series that explains the entire ongoing Persian Gulf crisis between Iran and the United States, which you can access by signing up for the CuriosityStream Nebula bundle deal for only $15 a year at curiositystream.com/real-life-lore. This is a stretch of water that's only a tad more than 30 miles wide. It's so small that you couldn't even fit Luxembourg inside of it, and yet, these 30 miles make up the most important location to understand in the entire known universe. By controlling these 30 miles, you can effectively rule the entire world, and by closing them down, you can effectively destroy the world. And this is why. The ocean spans most of our planet's surface, about 70% of it to be precise. In order to transport goods from one of Earth's many continents to another, this vast ocean that takes up 70% of the planet has to be traveled across. And in the 21st century, there are many ways to do so. Simply using an airplane to fly across in mere hours might be how you choose to do it, but airplanes are expensive, especially the more and more heavy an object it is that you're moving. So when it comes to cargo, 80% of the 21st century's global trade is still being carried out the way that it generally always has been for thousands of years now, by ship. At any given normal time, there are around 50,000 merchant vessels carrying as much as 6 million containers full of cargo and goods all across the world's oceans and between all the world's continents. These networks and streams of ships that you see moving in lines across the world's surface here are the literal arteries that power the beating heart of the 21st century global economy. And unfortunately, the world's oceans aren't very easy to navigate through. The geographic placement of the world's continents, islands, and land masses have created numerous natural choke points that these trade arteries have no other choice but to move through. And when these choke points become blocked by whatever means, they can cause a veritable stroke upon the world economy. This is exactly what happened earlier this year when one of the most important of these, the Suez Canal, was blocked for several days when a cargo ship became unexpectedly stuck in the middle, which blocked nearly $10 billion worth of global trade and caused widespread shipping and logistical delays across the entire world from North America to Australia. But there are other strategic maritime choke points to consider across the world as well. The Panama Canal controls the flow of trade between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans across the American landmass. The Cape of Good Hope controls the flow of trade around the African continent. The Strait of Gibraltar controls the flow between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. The Danish Straits between the Baltic and the North Sea. The Turkish Straits between the Mediterranean and Black Seas. And the Strait of Malacca between the Pacific and Indian Oceans. However, none of these are as important nor as dangerous as the Strait of Hormuz here, for many, many critical reasons. First among them, it's the only possible way for ships to move back and forth between the Persian Gulf in the west and the Gulf of Oman in the east, which then leads out to the greater global ocean. The Persian Gulf is particularly important for this equation because 8 countries share some of its coastline. Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman. And for 4 of those countries, the only maritime access they have is within the Persian Gulf, which means that the 30-mile wide Strait of Hormuz is the only possible location they can pass through in order to access the world's oceans. And if you know anything at all about the Middle East and the Gulf countries, you know that they're pretty much all completely loaded in oil. But oil is only part of what makes the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz especially so critically important. Oil is still the lifeblood of the modern world's economy. Around a third of our energy worldwide is produced by using it, and every single day, humanity consumes more than 9 million barrels of it. Oil is still by far the most common source of energy for human civilization in the 21st century. And as a non-renewable, it can't simply be produced. Oil is a resource that can only be extracted from where it already exists, and as it happens, it's not naturally found in too many parts of the world. Around the Persian Gulf Basin, across these dozens of oil fields marked in green, you can find roughly half of the entire planet's proven reserves of oil, including the single largest oil field in the world here in Saudi Arabia at Ghawar, which all on its alone produces nearly 6% of the entire world's oil supply. There are dozens of fabulously rich oil fields here that stretch across all 8 of the countries that border the Persian Gulf. But that's not the only valuable resource that can be found here. Marked in red, you can also find roughly 40% of the world's proven reserves of natural gas. Natural gas is the world's 3rd most common source of energy, behind oil and coal, and more than a 1/5 of the world's energy is produced by using it. Qatar itself produces the highest amount of liquefied natural gas in the world. And according to British Petroleum, Iran possesses the world's largest reserves of natural gas. Between all of these combined reserves, there is more oil and natural gas in the seas of the Persian Gulf and the land immediately surrounding it than anywhere else on the planet Earth. Since 1/3 of all the world's oil production is currently taking place around the Gulf, and 1/3 of the world's energy is powered by oil, and since a further 1/5 of natural gas production takes place around the Gulf, and about 1/5 of the world's energy is powered by gas, it can therefore be said that about 15% of the entire planet's energy supply comes from around the Persian Gulf, and largely behind the Strait of Hormuz. This is why the 30 miles of water here is so insanely important, because roughly 15% of all the energy that humanity is collectively consuming right now largely has no other choice but to pass through it. No other choke point in the 21st century's global transportation network can come anywhere even close to that level of critical importance. And it doesn't help that navigating through it is pretty geographically difficult. There are 8 major islands located inside of the strait which must be avoided by any ships, 7 of which are de facto controlled by Iran. These 3 strategically placed ones are contested by the United Arab Emirates, but the Iranian military has occupied them since the 1970s, so they're effectively controlled by Iran. These areas of water highlighted are too shallow for any tanker to traverse, while these areas separately highlighted have very limited visibility due to the obstructions from islands and land. Dust storms, morning fog, and haze can all make visibility within the strait even more challenging and are particularly common events during the summer months. The UN has established a special traffic separation scheme for tankers and other ships to take while traveling through to avoid the most risk. This scheme consists of only 2 2-mile-wide shipping lanes, one for incoming and another for outgoing traffic, while each is only separated by a 2-mile-wide buffer zone. The whole route travels through Iranian, Emirati, and Omani territorial waters at various times, and all of the world's largest ships must pass through them, and limited capability to avoid any unexpected obstructions that might or might not crop up. The overwhelming majority of all the oil that flows out of the Gulf travels towards East Asia, 76% of it. And most of that travels to only 5 countries. China is the world's largest importer of petroleum and the world's 2nd largest economy, and is heavily dependent on the oil flow coming out from the Strait of Hormuz, because it imports about 45% of its supply from the 8 countries around the Persian Gulf. Japan, the world's 3rd largest economy, is even more critically dependent and addicted. Infamously barren of most natural resources that are required for an industrial society, Japan has always been forced to seek them out abroad and away from their home islands, at times through war, while at other times through trade. Currently, they rely on trade, while oil and liquefied natural gas power more than 60% of Japan's energy needs. Nearly 100% of all of it is imported, and nearly 80% of that is transported by tankers from the Persian Gulf and through the Strait of Hormuz. Therefore, nearly half of Japan's energy, the fuel that powers the world's 3rd largest economy, has to travel through the 30 miles of water at the Strait of Hormuz. And South Korea, the world's 10th largest global economy, has similar dependencies. They import nearly 70% of their oil from the Persian Gulf states. And since oil powers more than 40% of their energy needs, nearly 1/3 of South Korea's energy supplies also have no other choice but to be delivered by tankers that are coming through the 30-mile-wide Strait of Hormuz. Were the strait ever to be obstructed or shut down for very long, the world's 2nd, 3rd, and 10th largest economies would immediately come to a screeching halt. The primary source of revenue for all 8 countries around the Persian Gulf would also immediately dry up, and the ripple effect from there would almost certainly crash the entire global economy. And in that event, there aren't many options for getting the oil and natural gas around the strait. Saudi Arabia does have a crude oil and liquefied natural gas pipeline that they can use to transport limited amounts from the rich fields around the Persian Gulf over to their ports on the Red Sea, while the United Arab Emirates has a similar pipeline that they can use to transport further limited amounts to the other side of their country on the Gulf of Oman and away from the Strait of Hormuz, but these amounts are all limited, while Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Iraq possess no such ability. At a maximum, it's believed that these pipelines can only divert about 20% of the oil coming out of the Persian Gulf around the Strait of Hormuz, and building any more oil pipeline infrastructure is expensive. All of this means that the 30-mile wide Strait of Hormuz is the most important choke point in the entire world for the global economy to function smoothly. And as a result, it's attracted considerable attention of countless empires and foreign powers from the outside. Most notably, the United States. The US maintains dozens of bases across Oman, the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Iraq. 7 of the 8 countries around the Gulf, save for Iran. This includes an Air Force base in Qatar, and the United States 5th Fleet being further headquartered within Bahrain, which is generally composed of more than 15,000 sailors, 2 aircraft carriers, dozens of other vessels, and between them and the Air Force Base, countless aircraft. As the current largest single source for all of humanity's energy, all of this presence in the area from the United States is generally in place to ensure that the oil continues flowing, and to counter Iran's influence over on the other side of the strait. The United States and Iran have had no official diplomatic relations for more than 40 years now, since 1980, and relations between the two sides of the strait have been continuously tense. In the event of a war breaking out, Iran has made numerous threats over the years to close the Strait of Hormuz from their side over to Oman, which, if successful, would shatter the world economy. And that's enough of a threat to always make America, or any other foreign power, think twice. But Iran's capability to do that is realistically pretty limited. While the Iranian military is powerful, America's is a lot more powerful, and the presence of the 5th Fleet so close by in Bahrain would almost guarantee American naval and air superiority almost immediately across the entire strait. Iran knows that their Navy and Air Force couldn't compete though, so as a result, most of their focus over the past decade has been centered around building air defenses and missile batteries across the coast that could simply bombard any ships passing through. Iran also possesses a massive arsenal of thousands of maritime mines that they could theoretically quickly fill the 30-mile wide strait with that would ground all trading activity through it to a halt for who knows how long. Theoretically, Iran could probably shut the strait down, but doing so would almost certainly invoke a very sharp response from a coalition of countries who would be staunchly opposed to it, likely led by the United States and Saudi Arabia. That conflict wouldn't be very pretty, and it's come dangerously close to already happening. Just 2 years ago in 2019, the United States began a military buildup around the Persian Gulf, while simultaneously withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal and imposing new sanctions upon the country. The conflict escalated from there to the point where an Iranian major general was assassinated in a US drone strike at the beginning of 2020, and led from there to Iran bombarding US military bases across Iraq with rockets and artillery. It was the closest that America and Iran have ever come so far to a full-out war, and the tension still hasn't gone away. The whole conflict between the United States and Iran is an incredibly complicated and incredibly controversial story to tell, full of countless tragedies, misunderstandings, and millions of lives who are almost constantly hanging in the balance. Without a doubt, it is one of the most critical and fascinating conflicts of the 21st century to understand. But unfortunately, it's at the same time not acceptable for me to cover in any kind of detail on YouTube due to their terms of service. After more than 5 years of making videos on this site, I know how making videos on YouTube works, and I know that this video already has a super high chance of being demonetized and unpromoted by YouTube's algorithms simply because of the controversial content that I'm discussing here. But the moment I really start diving into the whole history of the US-Iran conflict and how war war nearly broke out just last year between both sides, what's all at stake here, why it all began, how it's been fought, and how it all led to where we are today. It's a guarantee that this video will be censored and you won't ever get to see it. So instead, I created another full-length companion video in my ongoing Modern Conflict series that's the same full length as this video with all of that controversial, fascinating information included, and uploaded that directly to Nebula, which, as you've probably heard by now, is home to tons of exclusive, ad-free content like my entire Modern Conflict series. So far, with 6 other additional full-length videos that you can go watch right now, detailing the Israel-Palestine conflicts, the war in Afghanistan, the 2020 Armenia-Azerbaijan war, the conflict between North and South Korea, and the ongoing Russo-Ukraine war in the Donbass. New exclusive videos in this series are being added to Nebula every single month. And of course, the reason why all of these videos are only on Nebula is because the YouTube algorithm actually punishes me and all other creators for ever trying anything new. But Nebula is a different platform, without an algorithm and without any ads. It's just a platform about great and unique content made by great and independent educational creators. Nebula's ecosystem enables us to take huge risks with expensive projects like America's biggest ghost town, my own 35-minute-long documentary shot on location around the Salton Sea, the largest lake in California, and arguably America's greatest environment. Thousands from their homes and, as a result, created America's largest ghost town. And plenty more projects from other creators you know, like Wendover Productions, Real Engineering, Tom Scott, and many others. The best way to get access to Nebula and all of this incredible content is definitely through the amazing Curiosity Stream Nebula bundle deal. With its current sales price, it's less than $15 a year to get access to most price. But what's more, signing up will actually help countless independent educational creators beyond just real-life lore. So please make sure to sign up by clicking this button that's here on screen right now, which will take you directly to curiositystream.com/real-life-lore, or you can also follow the link that's down below in the description. And as always, thank you so much for watching.
Alright. So, hopefully people gained a little bit from that. No, I think... Can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay. So let's talk about this in yeah, I'll let him do the ad thing. But hopefully this puts some perspective on, one, the importance of this, and two, why we're seeing so much movement out of oil, right? As well as a lot of the kind of Russian and Chinese talks about this conflict, right? It is not in China's best interest that this gets shut down, as they're pulling 20% of their energy through this small area where they don't want to have anything to do with it at all. And there were some comments earlier when we were discussing this where it's like, okay, well, even if they do shut it down, like, wouldn't China still get their oil? That opens up a whole nother can of worm of Iran then choosing a side with these superpowers, right? Where they are willing to do that, but they're making so much money and so much of their personal economy by working with multiple, right? Where drawing those lines is a lot messier than not. Right. We understand there are still major sanctions on Russian energy coming into the EU. Obviously, they're kind of getting around that and still getting some energy going to China, but they suffer greatly from this as well. So this is a lot bigger than kind of what the media and what the headlines want you to know. And I feel like this, specifically surrounding the Strait of Hormuz, is the most important takeaway from this conflict and has the greatest impact on what we do. Like I said, both with tech and with oil securities, as well as kind of United States energy and our personal oil reserves here at home. Now, with that being said, it should make sense why we're seeing these moves in oil that are reflected much greater kind of on the speculation of any closing or issues with transporting through this area. And the flip side of that is like I said, over the weekend we saw out of Iran that they were talking or made public statements about closing it down. What the actual enforcement of that looks like, what that actually ends up being, we should probably know this weekend into next, depending on kind of what happens. But with that being said, if there are really no slowdowns, we can see dramatic moves in the price of oil back down, right? A lot of this is kind of in preparation for one of these types of catastrophes. And we've seen it, if people were around during COVID as well with negative oil, basically the exact opposite, right? Are less people consuming? We see these very, very, very large moves. Now with this, if supply comes down, and it's not on demand side, with demand actually most likely going up in terms of conflict, right? We need to produce more weapons. There's a lot more things moving around. We're going to see an uptick, but supply comes down at the same time. We can have really dramatic changes in costs. So hopefully people took something away from this. Is there any other comments, questions people have, opinions, things people want to discuss about this? I find this to be very important and the most important headlines that were coming up. Obviously, in terms of conflict, it's also important. And when I use the word important, it's to our kind of like what we do, right, in terms of the market. The transfer of oil and energy has a much greater impact on our overall equity prices. See a couple typers. Any outside things? Well, it's like I said with like Iran doesn't want to take a side, the United States does, right? I don't sit in the meeting, so I have no comments on that, but at this point I don't think we do. Don't think we do, especially since we have really strong allies on the opposite side, right, with Saudi Arabia and stuff. So, but I am not a political genius. I'm not even a political novice, so I just try to soak in the information. I think a lot of this stuff, for me anyways, and navigating through a handful of these type of things is just the best you can do is not try to form an opinion and instead just understand the effects, right? And then just make financial decisions around them. So everyone's gonna have a different reason for some of this stuff. With the time, I went a little bit longer with my market overview than I wanted to. Maybe we close it up here and do a shorter class. I did have another video, but it's a little bit longer about some trade and manufacturing stuff. But it isn't as, or it doesn't pertain as much to what we kind of went over today. So I will post the other video we don't need to do it together. I think it's worth a watch. Something Sig shared a couple weeks ago that was quite good with that. But because of the timing, I think we'll probably close up here at like 45 minutes, a little shorter than normal. And then next week we will get back into our more rigorous, academically based DOM and footprint stuff. So I think we'll have some really good examples to this week to bring. But please, for next week, think about it. If there are things that people are still struggling on with the DOM, with reading the DOM, understanding the DOM, subsequently footprint as well, right? Please bring them so we can go over them and really put a nice capstone on this or larger module we've done. So that is all I got for you guys. Bring stuff like this, especially during the day. If we have slow times, this is good things to discuss, good things to learn about, and to understand. So I will see you folks tomorrow if there's nothing else then. Thanks for hanging out today. Goodbye, everybody.
For those that are on YouTube who missed the beginning, there's a market overview. You might want to go back and check at the beginning of the VOD. It's probably like the first 30 minutes, just going over levels for the week. So this is a pretty non-standard class, but we'll be getting back to order flow next week. So just wanted to point that out, that there is still the market overview in the beginning of the class if you missed the beginning, for levels and overall pathing. I will see you all Wednesday. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. And yeah, have a good one.